Alright everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the Guns for Hire gaming PC build here, brought to you by Chris, or Meatwagon22 as most of you know me. Now we're going to go a little bit more in depth with what we need to do to assemble this thing, and maybe some of the ways that you guys can save some money if you're looking for more of a budget build. The idea here is these components here they're high-end, but what they do show you is they are the necessary components to build a PC. You don't have to get these highest levels, but you do need a motherboard, a CPU, a GPU, hard drives and memory and coolers and power supplies and cases. So let's go over maybe a little bit. Oh, and to preface, in that last video in part 1, the CPU, because I'm not familiar with the 2011 or the 2011 socket type, this is a 3960X CPU. I believe the i7-2600K over here is an 1156 socket. And what that means when I say socket is the number of pins, the type of socket. If you're going to run this type of CPU, you have to get the motherboard that accepts that socket. Same thing with the 2600K. You need to get the type of motherboard that would accept the 1156 socket. Hope it's 1156. Okay. Sometimes I'm trying to quote numbers off the top of my head. There's a lot of numbers to remember. Again, I'm kind of a noob when it comes to this stuff. So I'm going to move stuff around a little bit here. Let's just move this over so I can move this back and you can see a little bit more. Okay. Now, let's start off with the main part of this, which is the motherboard assembly with the CPU. CPU is already in place. It's got a lockdown on it. It has flat pins, not pins that actually stick in. So they're actually a lot easier to assemble these days. There's some stuff that I do at work that has pins. It'll have just a ton of real thin pins that you have to stick these types of chips into boards, and it's really hard to do. It's real easy to mess something up. These are a lot more user-friendly as far as installing a CPU on your motherboard. So let's look at a more reasonable, more budget-friendly type build. Starting off with your components, look at what kind of CPU do you want to run. You want to run an Intel, you want to run an i5 or an i7 series, whether it's the 2600, 2700, or the new numbers. They came out with some new numbering systems this year, but the i7-2600K is an incredible processor. The i5 is an incredible processor. It depends on what you're going to be doing. If you're going to be doing outright gaming, you can get away and save a little bit of money by going with an i5. But if you want to do video rendering, if there's going to be other members of your family using this, if they're going to be doing photo editing, things like that, you want to step up and go up to the i7. Don't shortcut yourself by a $75 difference in CPUs, because you will limit yourself a little bit, okay? Now, with the motherboard, Asus has a complete line of motherboards from the very, very cheapest regular computer to budget gaming, all the way up to enthusiast level like we have here. Okay, find yourself a good motherboard that's going to accept the chipset that you want to use, and go with that. You can save a lot of money that way. Now, motherboards, probably, I would say, to get a good motherboard for a budget build, you're probably looking around $175 to $225. That's what you're looking for in a very good motherboard, like the ones that I have in here. I think the newest ones out that are really good for that type of builds are the Z77 line. Okay? I hope that just doesn't backfire me trying to quote numbers and stuff for you guys, but I believe it's the Z77 line currently. All right? CPU, motherboard, okay? You can usually get what they call a bundled combination, that if you know the type, where it depends on where you're buying it and if you're assembling it yourself. I get bundles because I can save $50, $75, sometimes even $100 where I buy my parts. I get my stuff from a store called Micro Center. They have a local one here, but they're also online. So Micro Center is where I get my stuff. You can look at Tiger Direct. Newegg, places like that, okay? Shop around, find the best prices. The components are the same no matter where you get them. So do your homework. Do your homework on that to save yourself some money. So once you establish your build, what type of build you're going to do, your most expensive components are right here. You know, your GPU, your motherboard, and your CPU. That's where a lot of your money's going to go. So decide exactly what you want to do and how high up the food chain you want to go when it comes to these parts. And you can build a very good, or have a PC built, a very good one, for something that's within your budget range. Whether it's, say, $1,000 range, or, you know, 16 or over 2,000, or stepping up over 3,000, which is a lot. This is a lot more than most people need. A lot more, okay? So as far as building, what you need to do when you're dealing with something of this size, I will put the RAM memory in, I will assemble the cooler all out here before I try and put the motherboard into the case. First thing that goes into the case, I will put the power supply in there, I will put the hard drives in there, I will put all the bay components in there, then I will put the motherboard in with the CPU cooler on it. The RAM will already be installed, and the last thing that I will put in will be the GPU. Look at the size of this. Sliding this thing in here, I mean, look at this. Sliding this guy in here, it's pretty big. And you need everything in place before you try to put your GPU in there. So that will be the last thing that I put in to the case. All right. Now, here's something that I do. Now, there may be some PC specialists out there that disagree, but you don't necessarily do what I do. This works for me. So what I'm going to do is pass on this information to you guys. This is just something that works for me, and it seems to work very, very well, okay? I play PC games, right? I play on the highest resolution I can. I record at the same time I'm playing. Sometimes I record and live stream at the same time. So there's a lot going on, all right? So let's cover this. This is important because there's some information out there that may confuse you. SSD drive, solid state drive. What this does for you is, basically, it will let your computer boot up in, like, say 20 seconds. You'll be online and going from when you push the power button. That's the big thing about this. Your operating system will reside on this drive, okay? Now, a lot of people, they call them boot drives. SSD boot drive. Put your operating system on there and you go. All you need is 40 gigabytes. Don't believe that. I see that a lot of places. People try and pawn off 40 gigabyte drives for their boot drive. I say no. And this is why. This is very important. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here because I think it's important. This is one thing that I did my research, I thought and planned ahead, and thank goodness I did, okay? Don't use smaller than 120 gigabyte SSD drive. Do not use smaller than 120 gig. This is why. People say, oh, well, you're just putting your operating system on here, right? You have your other hard drives here to put your other stuff on. Not true. There are some games, there are some programs that must reside on the same drive as your operating system. That means it's going to go on here. That means if you only have 40 gig and you start getting some of that stuff on here, pretty soon you're going to max out your drive. And then what? Then what are you going to do? You're going to add another 40 gig, put them in a RAID array so it combines both of them into an 80 gig drive, have to reformat these drives, reload your operating system, and reload all those games? No. Think ahead, oversize your drive a little bit. Now, these are not cheap. They are coming down in price. SSD drives are not cheap, but the payoff in using it is awesome. You know, the speed in which these things read and write, the speed in which your computer is up and ready to go. There are a lot of benefits to using SSD drives, but do not shortcut yourself. Do not use less than 120 gigabytes, okay? Trust me on that one. Games like, I believe Minecraft. I believe Minecraft because it goes on here. It does not go on your other drives. It wants to reside on your same drive as your operating system. The Nazi zombie custom maps that I play, the game itself can reside over here, but the custom maps, first, I believe, reside on this drive. And the reason why I say all this stuff, and there's a lot of other games that do it as well, because I intentionally, when I load games, I intentionally put them in a certain place if I can, okay? And now let's go into the 2 hard drives. This is some of the stuff I wanted to cover. 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 120 gig. So we're going to put our operating system on our SSD drive, and we'll have room for any overflow of games or programs that have to reside on that drive. We're going to use a 1 terabyte drive, a high performance drive. This is where we put all of our games. This is where we put Steam, where we put Origin. This is where we put all of our games, our recording programs, everything. This is what you would consider our traditional C drive. You know, the only thing that's not going on there is the operating system. So that is our working drive. This is where we're going to do all of our stuff. We're going to play the game, and we're going to use our recording program here. The 2 terabyte drive, all I use that for is the recording too. Okay, that's where I send the raw recorded data to that 2 terabyte drive. Now, when you're recording with programs such as Fraps or DxTory, these programs record in uncompressed form, unlike a HD PVR would off of a console. That is compressed. It's extremely different file sizes, extremely different. Like one episode of Minecraft, if we go 20-30 minutes, you could have a 100 gigabyte file. You could have a 100 gigabyte file for that. That is a large file. It's uncompressed data, okay? So what we do is we write our recorded data to the 2 terabyte drive. All right. This is the setup that I have in my main computer that I record and play on. It's a little bit more complicated what I did there, but it basically run the same setup. I have a 120 gigabyte SSD drive. I've got a pair of 750 gigabyte Western Digital cards that I run in a RAID array, meaning they basically combine the 2 drives for a better performance. And then I have a third, or what would be considered a 4th drive, which is my 2 terabyte drive that I record all my videos to. Then when I go into my rendering program, I pull all my data off that drive. I also store on that drive the completed videos, the rendered, ready to upload to YouTube videos. All that stuff resides on the 2 terabyte drive. So you can see how I split up the stuff between these 3 drives. This is something I want to share with you guys because it's something that I do. It's something that works really well. Now, there may be people out there saying, well, you know, your data collision and this, that, and the other thing. And I tried to stay away from that as much as I could. I tried this, and it works really well. If you guys have a better way of doing it, feel free to share that in the comments with people, because the idea here is to get the best information out there for everyone to be successful in the overall outcome of their PC build. All right? But this works really good for me. SSD drive, operating system, and any overflow games. 1 terabyte drive, Steam, Origin, all your games, all your recording software goes on there, and a 2 terabyte drive to write everything to. Uncompressed data, large files like a 100 gigabyte file, maybe of Minecraft, or if you record a live stream session, that's where you want to get all that data to. Okay, seems to work really good as far as how the motherboard will route this stuff. We're using all SATA 3, 6 gigabytes per second cabling. We're trying to get the fastest speed in all of this stuff. So that is something that I definitely wanted to share with you guys as far as what I've done and what I'm going to do here. Okay, now what we're going to start doing is we're going to start assembling this thing. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the RAM on this board here, on the motherboard. I'm going to install, you got to get yourself some good thermal compound. Now this is paste, all right? It looks like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Teflon or whatever, but this is high thermal conductivity, low resistance. What it does is it allows the heat to transfer from the CPU, which is metal, to this metal plate here and up through the cooling pipes and into the radiator. What it does is it just better heat transfer. You want to get the heat away from the CPU. You want to get it up into your fans and radiators and get it cooled down. That is what thermal compound does. And thermal compound is used in all kinds of electronics and heat sinks. It's it's basically like a conduit connection, drawing the heat away, helping it transfer away from that piece of metal to that piece of metal faster. That's all it is, basically. So you want to get yourself, this was $10 or $12, all right, for this little tube. Basically a one-time use. But don't skimp on this. Don't get the best you can. This is Arctic Silver, or yeah, Arctic MX2 thermal compound, okay? Saying it's got an 8-year durability of heating cycles, because eventually anything that's like a paste or a compound will start to harden and it'll lose its ability to transfer that heat. So at that point you would, who's going to go 8 years though before they build another PC? In this day and age, 6 months down the line, you got all new stuff. So who's going to go 8 years, right? If you did, you would take that off, you would clean it, clean both sides, apply new compound, reinstall, and you're back in business, okay? That's one thing, bringing that up about how long and how new components are coming out all the time. They're coming out all the time. So if I build this today, 2 months from now, there's going to be new CPUs. There's going to be better boards. Okay, so take the time, try to get your budget correct to where what you're going to build now is going to last you 3 or 4 years. You don't need to always keep up with the Joneses. And what I mean by that, you don't always need to have what your best friend has. Don't try and outdo each other. Build something that's going to work for you and it's going to give you some longevity. You use the Asus motherboards, the Intel chips, the i7, stuff like that. You're going to be good to go. This PC here is 6 months old. My other one is a year old that I play on all the time. And it still dominates. i7, 580, GTX 580, Asus motherboard, Thermaltake power supply, it's still dominating, okay? I spent a little bit of extra money to get the quality parts that's going to last, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I don't think that you need to see me like physically doing this, right? I'm going to, for the next video, I'm going to just install the power supply in here, okay? Slides in, couple of screws, hold it in place. This power supply and the power supplies that I like, they're modular, what they call modular. You see, there's only this set of cabling coming off, which is basically for your motherboard and for your GPU. That's what these basically are. Here, you add cables as you need it, as you have more components. You're going to add a cable to power your hard drives and your SSD drive. You're going to add power for, well, your fan is going to plug into your motherboard, and we'll cover all that stuff. Your auxiliary components here are going to need power, so you only plug in the cables that you need. That way, you don't have all of these cables hanging off like all the old power supplies did, that you got to zip tie and curl up and try and get out of your way, because cabling in these builds is very important. You have to organize your cabling, not for looks, but for airflow. All right? Picture a fan blowing across here with nothing in between. It blows air really good. Now picture cables going all in its way and blocking and dispersing and corrupting and making turbulent airflow. That's why cabling is so important. It's not for looks and big LEDs and all that fancy stuff. It's for airflow. That's what's so important about it. So modular power supply is what I really like, because you only have to install the cables that you need. Whatever you don't need, you have spare slots for later on. Okay? So what I'll do is I will install the power supply in the case. I will get the RAM installed and get the cooler installed. And in the next video, then we'll go over that. We'll go over where you have the fan plugins. There's multiple points on these motherboards to plug in fans for the CPU cooler and fans for the case. The fans for the case are just going to give them power and run when you start up. The CPU fans, you can utilize the advanced BIOS and the intelligence of this motherboard to control your CPU fans. So very specific terminals that you actually plug those into. That way your system can control based upon the heat. It can increase the speed of your fans. So I think on this one had like 6 or 8 different places, but a couple of them are labeled CPU fans. Now, whether it's your little guy, these actually have some trim pots on here that you can increase as well. But you're gonna want to tie it into your chip, especially if you're using Intel's turbo technology, where it ramps up. It basically does its own auto overclock for you, which works really, really well. I use it on these. I don't do my own overclock. I use Intel's turbo technology, and it increases this thing up. Oh man, it works really, really well. Stay away from overclocking unless you're one of those guys out there that really know what you're doing, or you've got disposable income where if you burn something up, you can just replace it. Then you can do whatever you want. But for everybody else, if you go with Intel chips, use the turbo technology. When you're not doing anything, it lowers it way, way down, your speed of your processor. That way it runs a lot cooler. Then when you step up, you start gaming, bam, that turbo kicks in, and it kicks in. Trust me. I use a program called CPU-Z. It shows me temps, speeds of memory, CPU, all this stuff. And you can see as soon as I open a program, that thing ramps up. Oh, it works really, really good. And it's a lot safer than trying to do it yourself. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to assemble a little bit of this stuff. And in the next video, I will show you what we have assembled in here. We'll start moving forward with this and getting this thing put together. So I hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. I hope this has been informative. And again, my concern is I had seen a couple other people do PC builds and people were upset that they didn't see any of the building. But trust me, the memory, it slides in. It just slides in. This just bolts in. I'm going to do as much as I can to show you how to assemble this stuff. But I would imagine that most of you are not going to physically build your own PC. You may have a company build it. That's why the information I'm giving you will give you the tools to pick the components that you need to pick for your other PC or for your new PC for someone else to build for you. But this will give you kind of an overview of what it takes to assemble one of these. The assembly of it is not the hard thing. I'm going to bolt this in. I'm going to slot those in, bolt that, put this in. That's not the hard part. That's the fun part. It's not the hard part. Hard part is getting all this to work together. Okay? Picking the right components and staying within budget. So, all right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Again, I hope it's a bit entertaining and informative. So I will see you guys in the next part where it's actually assembly and get some stuff in the case. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.